Whether King Charles dies or abdicates, Prince William will one day take the throne, and things are going to change for Camilla. In the event of his father's death, William, as king, would be the primary decision-maker for the firm.
After years in the public eye, here's proof that Kate Middleton is ready to be queen.
The words came through official channels just as dawn was breaking. It is with profound sadness that we announce the passing of His Majesty King Charles. The statement was brief, carefully worded, and absolutely devastating. Across Britain, people woke to headlines they had hoped would never come. Not now, not this suddenly. The king who had waited his entire life to wear the crown had held it for such a short time.
Heir to the throne since he was 3 years old, Prince Charles just became Great Britain's new monarch at the age of 73. It was the beginning of a life preparing for his role as future king.
And now, in what felt like the blink of an eye, everything had shifted once again. What made this moment even more staggering was what happened next. There was no pause, no period of waiting to see what would come. Within hours of Charles taking his final breath, Prince William was no longer a prince. He was King William, and Catherine, who had spent years as a beloved princess, was now Queen Catherine.
King William and Queen Catherine dealing with it, doing all of it until their children.
The transition happened overnight, literally. While most of the world slept, the monarchy moved forward with the kind of speed that leaves you breathless. This wasn't how anyone imagined it would happen. But duty doesn't wait for perfect timing, and the crown certainly doesn't pause for grief. The illness no one saw coming this fast. Charles had been fighting, everyone knew that. Since his diagnosis became public knowledge in early 2024,
over a year after the British monarch shared he had been diagnosed with an undisclosed cancer in February of 2024,
he'd been open about his health challenges in a way that felt both brave and deeply human. He continued working, showing up, doing his duty even when you could see the exhaustion in his face. But there's a difference between knowing someone is unwell and believing the end is near. Most assumed there would be more time, months, maybe even years with proper treatment. The reality hit differently. Those final weeks were harder than anyone outside the inner circle realized. Charles pushed himself to maintain appearances because that's what he'd been trained to do his entire life. Show up, serve, never let them see you falter. But behind palace walls, medical teams were growing increasingly concerned. The decline was accelerating. Quietly, preparations began. Not the kind you talk about openly, but the kind that protocol demands. Still, when the moment actually arrived, it caught even those closest to him off guard. He was at Balmoral when it happened. That detail matters because Balmoral had always been his sanctuary, the one place where he could truly breathe. Surrounded by family, away from the constant pressure of public life, he slipped away peacefully. No drama, no chaos, just a quiet goodbye in the place he loved most. For William, the phone call that came in the early hours didn't just change his title. It changed everything. Picture this. You're at home with your children, and the phone rings at an hour when phone calls are never good news. William picked up, and in that single conversation, his world transformed completely. The father he'd been praying would have more time was gone, and the responsibility he'd been preparing for his entire life was now immediate, unavoidable, and crushing in its weight. Catherine reportedly reached for him the moment she saw his face, understanding before he even spoke what had happened. Their first thought wasn't about crowns or ceremonies. It was about George, Charlotte, and Louis, still sleeping peacefully upstairs, blissfully unaware that their grandfather had just passed, and their father had just become king. How do you wake your children with that kind of news? How do you explain that everything familiar is about to change? Catherine insisted they let the kids sleep a bit longer, giving them a few more hours of innocence before reality crashed in. When morning came, they sat down as a family. William and Catherine handled it the way they handle everything, with honesty tempered by gentleness. George understood immediately. his face showing a maturity that no child his age should have to carry. Charlotte asked quiet questions, processing in her careful way. Louis, the youngest, just wanted to know if his grandfather was hurting anymore. The answer was no, but that didn't make any of this easier. Here's something most people don't fully grasp about monarchy. The transition is instant, not next week, not after a funeral, not after everyone has had time to process. The second Charles died, William became king by law. There's no gap, no interim period. The crown simply moves, as it has for over 1,000 years. By sunrise, William was already dealing with matters that required the king's signature, his hand probably shaking as he wrote his new title for the first time. The palace corridors were filled with controlled chaos, staff moving quickly but quietly, phones ringing constantly, messages flying back and forth. But through it all, there was an eerie sense of calm, or maybe it was shock. Officials who had worked with Charles for decades were suddenly working for William. Protocols that had been theoretical were now immediate reality. And somewhere in the middle of all this, a son was trying to mourn his father while simultaneously becoming the head of state. Camilla, now Queen Dowager, became an unexpected source of strength. She'd lost her husband, but she understood better than anyone what William was facing. During one particularly difficult moment, she pulled him aside and shared something Charles had told her near the end. William is ready. He's always been ready. Those words, coming from the woman who knew Charles best, helped William push through the fog of grief and step fully into his role. But ready or not, the weight was enormous. Catherine steps into an impossible role. While William was dealing with the constitutional and ceremonial demands, Catherine was managing something equally important, holding their family together. The transition to queen isn't just about titles and protocol, it's about becoming a symbol, a leader, a voice for an entire nation, while also being a wife who just watched her husband lose his father, and a mother whose children are frightened and confused. Those close to the palace describe Catherine in those first days as absolutely remarkable. Publicly, she was composed, dignified, everything a queen should be. But privately, she was the emotional anchor for everyone around her. She sat with her children when they cried. She held William when the weight became too much. She checked on Camilla to make sure she wasn't alone in her grief, all while processing her own shock and sadness at losing someone who had welcomed her into this impossibly complicated family. Her background in early childhood development meant she understood exactly what her kids needed.
The royal family wants to put a bruising few months behind them with the launch of a new early childhood campaign led by the Princess of Wales.
Structure, honesty, space to feel whatever they were feeling. She created pockets of normalcy in the chaos. Family meals, quiet time together, moments where they could just be a family rather than the royal family. But she also prepared them for what was coming, the public scrutiny, the changed routines, the reality that their father was now king and their lives would never quite be the same. Within minutes of the official announcement, the world responded. Social media exploded with reactions, shock, disbelief, heartfelt tributes to a king who'd barely had time to shape his reign. News outlets scrambled to shift coverage, pulling together hastily prepared packages about Charles's life and what this meant for the future. World leaders drafted statements of condolence, and across Britain, people simply stopped and stared at their screens, trying to process information that felt surreal. The outpouring of grief was genuine and widespread. People lined up outside royal residences to leave flowers, notes, photos. Buckingham Palace became a sea of tributes, each one representing someone touched by Charles's decades of service. He'd been a controversial figure at times, yes, but by the end, he'd earned respect and genuine affection. The fact that his reign was cut so short made the loss feel even more tragic. But beneath the mourning was something else, curiosity and cautious optimism about what came next. William and Catherine were known quantities: popular, relatable, modern. Their approach to royal life had always felt more accessible than traditional. Now, with full authority and responsibility, what would they do? How would they reshape the monarchy? The world was watching, waiting to see if this sudden, heartbreaking transition might also mark the beginning of something new. Normally, coronations are planned for months, sometimes over a year. Elaborate ceremonies, global guest lists, pageantry on an enormous scale. But this wasn't normal. This was a family in mourning and a nation needing leadership immediately. So what happened was something in between, a private ceremony at Westminster Abbey that honored tradition while acknowledging the unusual circumstances. The event was small, intimate by royal standards. Close family, key officials, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, who performed the ancient rites. William and Catherine stood together, exhaustion visible on their faces, but determination even more so. When the crowns were placed, there were tears. When the oaths were spoken, voices cracked with emotion. This wasn't the grand celebration coronations usually are. It was a solemn acceptance of duty in the wake of loss. George, Charlotte, and Louis were there, dressed formally, but looking so young and vulnerable. George stood closest to his parents, already understanding the gravity of what was happening. Charlotte held Louis's hand, keeping him steady when he started to fidget.
Princess also shared a special moment with her brother, Prince Louis. The two were photographed holding hands.
The image of those three children watching their parents crowned will likely become one of the defining images of this era. A reminder that behind all the ceremony and history are real people facing real emotion. In the days following his death, people began talking more about Charles's legacy. It's human nature. When someone passes, we look back and try to understand what they stood for, what they accomplished. And the truth is, Charles achieved more than many realize. His environmental advocacy was decades ahead of its time. His support for disadvantaged communities was genuine and hands-on. His vision for a more modern, more compassionate monarchy laid groundwork that William is now building on. The charities he championed saw donations surge in the wake of his death. People wanted to honor his memory by supporting the causes he cared about. His focus on sustainability, mental health, and community development created frameworks that will continue long after him. In a way, his influence is just beginning to be fully felt, even as the man himself is gone. That's the mark of real leadership, creating something that outlasts you. William has been vocal about continuing his father's work, particularly on environmental issues. The Earthshot Prize, which gained significant attention during William's time as Prince of Wales,
King Charles III officially named his son Prince William and daughter-in-law the Prince and Princess of Wales,
is expanding with renewed energy and purpose. It's not just about honoring Charles's memory. It's about recognizing that the issues he fought for are only becoming more urgent. William isn't just inheriting a crown, he's inheriting a mission. The children who must grow up too fast. George is facing a reality that would overwhelm most adults, let alone a child. He knows he'll be king someday. That's not a distant, abstract concept anymore. It's a clear path that started the moment his father took the crown. The pressure of that knowledge is immense, but those who know him describe a boy who's thoughtful, serious when he needs to be, but still managing to be a kid when circumstances allow. Charlotte has always been the emotional center of the sibling trio. She reads people well, understands situations quickly, and responds with empathy beyond her years. In the aftermath of Charles's death, she became a source of comfort for Louis, explaining things in ways he could understand, offering hugs when everything felt scary and confusing. Her role in this family, though less formal than George's, is absolutely critical. Louis is still young enough that much of this feels abstract. He knows his grandfather died, he knows his father is now king, but the full implications haven't hit yet. And maybe that's a blessing. His innocence, His ability to still find joy and laughter reminds everyone else that life goes on, that even in grief, there are moments of light. William and Catherine are fiercely protective of that innocence, knowing it won't last forever but wanting to preserve it as long as possible. William has been clear about his vision, a streamlined monarchy that serves rather than simply exists. Now, with full authority, those plans are moving from theory to action. Early announcements focused on reducing costs, increasing transparency, and making royal properties more accessible to the public. These aren't radical moves, but they signal a different philosophy, one where the institution justifies its existence through service and relevance. The focus on mental health continues to be central. William's work with various mental health organizations isn't slowing down, it's accelerating.
10 years ago, I didn't know anything about mental health. I really didn't. And I immersed myself in this topic because we realized and identified that this was a key social problem. Not just for the UK, this was global.
He's using his platform to normalize conversations about therapy, trauma, and emotional wellness. It's personal for him, shaped by his own experiences with loss and the pressure of public life. And because it's genuine, it resonates with people who might otherwise feel disconnected from monarchy. Catherine is carving out her own priorities as queen. Early childhood development remains her passion, but now she has the influence to actually shape policy and funding priorities. She's not interested in symbolic gestures or photo ops. She wants to create programs that make measurable differences in children's lives. Her approach is research-based, collaborative, and intensely practical. This is a queen who does her homework and demands results. Charles's death has rippled through the entire extended royal family. Relationships are being reconsidered. Priorities are shifting. There's a sense that life is too short for unresolved conflicts, and conversations that had been avoided are now happening. The most talked about is the potential for reconciliation with Prince Harry, who remains physically distant, but reportedly reached out privately after his father's death. William's response to Harry's gesture was described as measured, but not cold. There's hurt there, yes, but also an understanding that family matters. Whether that translates to actual reconciliation remains to be seen, but doors aren't permanently closed. The situation is complicated, made more so by public statements and media coverage, but both brothers are reportedly aware that their father would have wanted them to find their way back to each other. Other family members are stepping up to support the new king and queen. Anne, known for her work ethic and no-nonsense approach, has taken on additional duties. Edward and Sophie are more visible in their support roles. There's a sense that everyone understands this is a pivotal moment, and the institution is stronger when the family functions as a unit rather than a collection of individuals pursuing separate agendas. The international stage watches closely. Beyond Britain's borders, world leaders are paying careful attention to how this transition unfolds. The British monarchy carries significant soft power, cultural influence, diplomatic weight, historical connections. How William and Catherine approach their international responsibilities will matter enormously, not just for Britain, but for the Commonwealth and beyond. Early signs suggest they'll be more personally engaged than previous generations. Not just state visits and formal dinners, but genuine partnerships on issues like climate change, economic development, and humanitarian work. Their credibility comes from authenticity. They've spoken openly about struggles, shown vulnerability, and built trust by being real people rather than distant symbols. The Commonwealth in particular is at a crossroads. Some member nations are reconsidering their constitutional ties to the monarchy. William has indicated he supports each country's right to make its own choice, which is either remarkably enlightened or simply pragmatic recognition of changing times. Either way, it's a different approach than rigidly defending traditional structures regardless of local sentiment. The emotional toll of these weeks is impossible to overstate. William lost his father and immediately had to become king. Catherine became queen while supporting a grieving husband and frightened children. The whole family is processing trauma while under constant public scrutiny. It's exhausting, overwhelming, and unrelenting. But through it all, there's a thread of determination that keeps them moving forward. Reports from inside the palace describe late nights and early mornings, with William working through documents while Catherine checks on the children. Then the two of them finally sitting together in the quiet hours before dawn, processing everything that's happened and everything that's coming. These aren't just figureheads going through ceremonial motions. They're human beings carrying impossible weight while trying to maintain some semblance of normal family life. The support they're receiving matters enormously. Palace staff, longtime advisors, extended family, everyone is rallying around them. But ultimately, this is their journey to navigate, their decisions to make, their legacy to build. And the early indications suggest they're approaching it with a combination of respect for tradition and willingness to evolve that might just define what 21st century monarchy looks like. We're standing at the beginning of something, though exactly what remains unclear. William and Catherine have inherited an institution with over 1,000 years of history, and they're being asked to make it relevant for a future that's changing faster than ever. It's a daunting task, made more so by the sudden, heartbreaking circumstances that brought them here. But if these first weeks have shown anything, it's that they're not approaching this casually. Every decision is deliberate. Every public appearance is meaningful. Every policy shift is considered. They understand that people are watching, judging, hoping. That the monarchy's future isn't guaranteed. It has to be earned through service, relevance, and genuine connection to the lives of everyday people. The loss of King Charles will be felt for years to come. His reign was too brief to fully realize his vision, but the seeds he planted are growing under William and Catherine's care. Environmental work continues. Community outreach expands. Mental health advocacy deepens. The monarchy evolves not by abandoning its past, but by building thoughtfully on it. And at the center of all this are two people who never asked for any of this to happen so soon, but who are rising to meet the moment anyway. William, carrying his father's memory and his grandmother's lessons. Catherine, bringing warmth and practical wisdom to an ancient institution. Together, they're writing the next chapter of a story that began long before them and will continue long after. But right now, in this moment, it's their story to shape. The crown has passed, the grief is real, but so is the resolve to honor what came before while building something worthy of what comes next. This is only the beginning, and the whole world is watching to see where it leads. If this deep dive into the overnight transition resonated with you, hit that like button. Share this with anyone who's been following this historic moment closely. And make absolutely sure you're subscribed, because we'll be covering every development as this new reign unfolds. Tap the notification bell so you don't miss a single update. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you.